Mr. Speaker, when the Minister of Jobs and Families, in her rebuttal, states, "It's no joke when you lose your job and there is nothing there to catch you." Will the Liberal government or the leader of Liberal government, in being Mr. Prime Minister Mark Carney, admit that hundreds of thousands of Canadians are jobless and homeless, and in this particular recession, what does a recession mean? There is nothing to catch us as an economy, which means if all of a sudden, as argued by the Minister of Jobs and Families, when argued that if there is nothing there to catch us, this is why the government sets up programs in place to have something to catch us as civilians. Now, what happens when there is nothing to catch us? We are in a recession. We in Canada are the only G7 recession in the entire G7 base. Every other country in the G7 seems to be, you could say, growing. Whereas since Mr. Prime Minister Mark Carney has specifically stepped into office in Parliament, we have seen a, once again, doubling of our national deficit. In doubling said national deficit, which Mr. Carney has won the particular election of 2025 as a result of specifically two provinces holding more seats due to having a larger population within each individual province. This particular issue now arises where if only, imagine, one province, one Liberal, would we essentially see, if one province held the most seats, would we essentially see a red state where all other provinces are overruled by one particular rule due to only one province essentially having the most seats in the electoral votes? Now, based on how we also as Canadians are not technically the greatest voters out there, if you were to look at the particular electoral votes, you would particularly find that approximately less than 500,000 people vote at each election, which out of these particular 500,000, we then dictate the next 4 years of the particular government that will overrule 30 plus million people. Now, essentially what ends up happening is, who are the predominant voters? You could actively say individuals that have the time to go vote, or individuals that are invested in voting. When you look at the rest of the population that specifically doesn't take the time out of their day to go vote, and as a result of not voting, we are now ruled by two provinces as an entire country. We are ruled by Ontario and Quebec, which both combined are shutting down the West in order to bring more people east, which the more people they bring east, the more seats they will have. However, we're seeing an opposite effect. As of today, June 3rd, 2026, we are a few days away from the deadline in order to create the Alberta independence votes. Now, at this particular moment, I would like to raise this particular notion. Canada, all of Canada, absolutely every single territory of Canada is in debt by $55.3 billion as a result of this national deficit. Now this is, as we have found, we are not actively generating enough wealth to maintain making the payments every year, which as a result of not being able to make said payments every year, what has essentially happened? Canada has gone in recession, which a recession means we don't have anything. There is nothing behind our economy anymore. We don't have a dime, essentially. And in this particular government, we find a few intellectual claiming to be intellectuals, but mostly ideologies, which in these particular ideologies, I'm not going to touch in this particular video, but in the idea, now as an entire country, having to pay back $55.3 billion, which is as a result of one man. Let me ask you, would you go to war for one man if one man decided we are going there? Would you spend the rest of, say, the next 25 years fighting for your life, struggling as a Canadian, due to the fact that one man has tanked our economy and now we have nothing to catch us? Now, Mr. Carney, as the Liberals essentially are of an Eastern, you could say, territory, here's a proposition to the rest of the West. We have more resources than they do beyond the point of where Ontario begins and Manitoba ends. At this particular landmass, anything west of that, we could actively rebuild as a greater country. If two provinces want to rule over an entire country simply by piling civilians into tight living quarters, and the tighter these living quarters get, we get to the point now where there's no living quarters and there's nothing, once again, nothing to catch us. And so at this particular point, Alberta strong and Alberta proud. We have the decision to make as a province whether we wish to stay embezzled within Mr. Carney's mess. And by embezzled, I mean we are essentially going to be the ones having to pay it back for them once again. as Albertans, we are this economy's backbone, which means in the idea of placing patience and then gaining the leverage. You see, if we get our independence as Albertans, what essentially happens is we're going to take their piggy bank away, because Alberta is the backbone of the Canadian economic finance world. Any money Canada wishes to spend, that money is generated right here in Alberta. And because that money is generated right here in Alberta, the moment we separate, they have nothing left to catch them. And the moment a country has nothing left to catch them, if they seek to say they are strong, well, let's see how strong you truly are without a foundation. A foundation as a pillar that upholds your entire country. And in Alberta, by being patient, we have actively gained leverage. Because the moment we separate, those two provinces are going to come begging at our ankles for us to return into their economy. And because we have this leverage, they may argue, we don't need Alberta. All the more reason we're not staying here in Canada. Welcome to the nation of Alberta. So let's keep voting and let's make this election happen, because we actively have a chance to have one of the most prosperous economies in the entire world if we as Albertans separate from the Carney-like mind, simply, you could say, emptying those pockets, which as a result, there is now nothing to catch us. Now, I'm no economic genius, but I can pretty much figure out how long it's going to take for one particular individual's mess, one man, and this one man has resulted in the possible enslavement. We're just about to see this. We're going to see, essentially, that based on one man irresponsibly spending the Canadian economics taxpayer money, in this particular deficit, where has the money gone? That we don't know. But who's essentially going to pay back based on one man deciding for each individual Canadian? Every single Canadian will essentially be broke until we pay back this deficit. And at the rate they're essentially stating, we need to specifically pay back about $3 billion in debt a year in order to pay back this deficit. Now, in terms of the actual debt plus the interest charges at 3% interest, that's a lot of money each year. How many years are we essentially going to be paying back? this deficit, Mr. Speaker,